restart his heart.
But at just 41, the husband and father of 3 was slipping away.
The only thing I remember is I started seeing a light and started walking towards the light.
While the ICU team tried to revive Brian, he claims he was walking along a heavenly path lined with flowers, then stopped by a familiar face.
She was the most beautiful thing when I seen her. It was like the first day I met her, and looked so happy.
His mother-in-law, Kay, who had just passed away.
She grabbed a hold of my arm and she told me, it's not your time. You don't need to be here. We need to take you back. You got things to go home and do.
And after what felt like 15 minutes,
her husband, Jack, was back here waving at me, giving me a smile. And she just telling me to go home. It walked me back.
But at the hospital, time was running out. Or so everyone thought.
We shocked him 4 times. And on the 4th time, it still didn't work. And then, out of nowhere, he got his pulse back.
A normal heartbeat after nearly 45 minutes.
It's pretty awesome to see.
Even more incredible was Brian's condition.
So if you think about that, his brain had no oxygen for 45 minutes. So the fact that he is up, walking, talking, laughing, everything, I mean, that's amazing.
As is Brian's memory of the white light.
And I just totally broke down. And I went and sat down because I totally lost it when he told me that.
But Brian says there's no reason to feel sad. The experience has changed his entire outlook on life and death.
There is an afterlife, and people need to believe in it big time.
He says he's eternally grateful to the medical staff and his mother-in-law for this second chance.
I need to be here a lot more longer. I got 3 wonderful daughters and a wife.
And in the end, he says, that's all that really matters.
Love, very much love.
So what do we think about that?
So one of the very first things that I was thinking as we were going through here was that he was without oxygen for 45 minutes. And I mean, typically they say you can go, 7 minutes without oxygen to the brain and you
Correct.
are brain dead?
Yep.
So that, I think, is the absolutely more amazing part of it, that something else must have been going on there in his body to somehow keep oxygen to his brain. Because otherwise, his heart could have restarted, but he'd just be a vegetable.
That's what's unexplainable about it.
Yeah. So that was sweet. A nice mother-in-law story, too.
Yeah. But that's the whole thing, is there's this huge mystery surrounding it. It's this amazing phenomena. It's incredible. And I would like to point out, too, you kind of look at this, and you guys can do a lot of this at home, too, if you're really interested in this stuff like me. There are NDE accounts from all different cultures all over the world. We, for the sake of this program, only because a lot of the ones found online are very, very accent heavy, and the quality isn't so good. So we're going to play mostly them from the United States. Typically, people here tend to be, at least the ones I've found online from the United States, are people dealing with like Christian backgrounds. But there are them from all different cultures.
Cool.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting.
Yeah. You want to do another one?
Yeah. So when you look into near-death experiences, they say about 90% of them have a positive near-death experience. So you go over, you are in heaven, right? Or you're with your family. So a lot of people say they see God. A lot of people claim to see Jesus. A lot of people claim to see angels or Archangel Michael, or different people like that. Almost everyone sees loved ones that have gone, or pets even, which is interesting. But one thing that a 10% get is a negative near-death experience.
There's always got to be some.
I mean,
if it was a good time by everybody would be out there doing it.
Well, it's interesting because this brings up what I was talking about at the top of the show, which is people dealing with non-human entities in hell. So here's one of those right now. And this one, before we get going, it ends well because he comes back to life, right? But it's something to think about. And there are a few accounts like this out here. So here we go. Our next story, we're going to hear about this guy. He was raised Catholic, ended up deciding he didn't like the church, really didn't like Jesus. And he goes into it more in his clip, which you can find on CBN on YouTube. It's called Visions of Hell and Heaven. He was selling drugs. He was living this bad life. He was living in a trailer. Someone gave him some marijuana to smoke. What they didn't tell him is that there was crack cocaine laced with the marijuana, which caused him to go into cardiac arrest. So here's what he found during his near-death experience.
Jordan was sure he was dying.
I can feel my heart going boop, 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 slowing down, boop, 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 and then like fluttering.
Jordan believes in that moment he went to hell.
All these women and all the things you think you want in the world, money, cars, success, all these things that I had, and I was driving, I was just loving it. And then all of a sudden this car broke down. All of a sudden these women turned to huge, huge demons. And it earthquaked. And I look behind me and I can hear screaming. It's all red and black. Turn around, get out of here. It sounded like people burning. People that were just burning, that couldn't find a cure or a fix to anything. It was just the worst. And I remember being afraid, gripping the steering wheel. And all of a sudden it was like, I'm back to my body in the trailer room.
As Jordan was taking what he thought was his last breath, he made a declaration of faith to God.
And my heart's going boom, boom, like the last beat. Not even knowing why, I just said, I believe. And all of a sudden, boom, I'm gone.
That's when Jordan says Jesus pulled him out of hell and took him to heaven.
He was all in white. He was in a robe when I saw him. And he looked at me and he wears a crown on his head. His eyes are fierce like fire, but there is no like color, just bright looking at me. And he just is amazing.
Then Jordan believes he was standing before God.
The Lord went to the right hand of the Father, and I began to get judged by the Father. And it was the worst, because what happened was he played secrets in my heart that I locked away that I only knew that I ever did. And I thought no one could do it, and I could feel what God felt. And I said, Lord, forgive me. Like it was the worst feeling. And he just comes in and he hugs you. He says, all is forgiven. My old heart was broken. My old heart needed fixing. And God gave me a new heart. All of a sudden, he told me he loved me, that I'm not alone, that I've never been alone. He showed me all the times in my life where I thought I was lucky, that I thought I was alone, but how his hand was always just upon me. And he was always right there pursuing me nonstop. He hugged me again, told me he loved me. And all of a sudden, I was like, I'm back in my trailer room on the floor. I grabbed the Bible. It was like it was glowing and I held it. I opened up the Bible. First thing I ever read out of the Bible was Psalms 34. The happiness of those who trust in God. I began to read it and it was everything that just happened to me. Only God can do that.
So I think that one's very interesting. Yeah, okay, fair. He was on drugs. That's fair. Mm-hmm. We can just point that out right off the bat. No one's saying he wasn't on drugs. He was on drugs at that point. But he stopped using drugs and he went into seminary.
Okay.
So I think that's profound. I think that's a beautiful experience to have.
Definitely a life-changing event happened there.
For sure.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of drug users have hallucinations for sure. Mm-hmm. It's like what Drea was talking about when we had the Unbelievers interview. Like, you know, people always say like, oh, what were you smoking? What were you drinking? Like, okay, well, I've smoked pot a lot of times and that's never happened, right? Or I've had beer a lot of times. That's never happened.
Right.
It's something very different is occurring. And that's kind of how I feel about this. Like, you can do all the stuff you want, you know, but at the end of the day, very rarely does one come out of a drug-induced hallucination is like, yeah, I think I'm just going to become a pastor now.
Yeah. I'm going to follow God now.
That's rare.
I would agree. That is a rare reaction to what sounds like a pretty classic overdose.
I don't think most people who overdose think they've been to hell and see God.
No, but what he was describing about like his heart fluttering out.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, he was definitely dying. Yeah.
So his reaction to his overdose was to clean up his life and follow God.
Yeah, based on what he saw.
Yeah. Seems like a good candidate for AA. Step 1. Acknowledge there's a higher power.
Okay, so the next one we're going to do, which I liked a lot, comes from Fox News. And this one is from 2012. And they're interviewing a doctor, a former doctor, about her near-death experience. which is wild. And I just think it's so interesting that so many people who devote their life to science and medicine are still coming out saying this wasn't that. You know what I mean? Like, these people have studied their entire lives. They put everything into believing in empirical evidence.
Mm-hmm.
And then these events happen and they're like, there's something else we don't know about.
Right.
I think it's very interesting.
And now to an incredible story of survival. A well-respected surgeon kayaking in a remote South American river drowns. 15 minutes underwater after a horrific accident pins her to the bottom of a river. No air and no way out. Amazingly, Dr. Mary Neal did manage to make it out alive after she was rescued. But she says she had a glimpse of the afterlife that she calls one of the greatest gifts she's ever received while she was struggling under that water. Author of the book To Heaven and Back, Dr. Mary Neal joins me now. She's an orthopedic spinal surgeon. Dr. Neal, thank you so much for being here. I want to start with this. Prior to this incident, were you a religious person?
I would say I was pretty typical in that I was raised in a church on Sunday mornings, and I did take my own children to Sunday school. But I think it was typical that I never incorporated spirituality into my daily life. And
did you have a thought about an afterlife or a heaven prior to this, one way or the other?
I'm not sure I really spent the time to think about it. I had 4 young children and a full-time job and a husband, and life gets in the way of thinking about spiritual things usually.
So you're out in this horrific accident. You find yourself under a waterfall kayaking, and you get
It wasn't
pinned.
horrific. It was wonderful.
Right. It starts off kind of horrific, though. And take us through it. What happens to you as you find yourself submerged underwater?
Well, I was submerged, and the force of the water had me absolutely pinned to the front deck of the boat. And so I was not able to push myself out of the boat or pull the spray skirt off and exit the boat. And I tried a number of times before it became clear that I wasn't going to be able to exit the boat on my own. And I was far enough away from the shore of the river that I didn't think anyone was going to be pulling me out. And at that time, I gave my life over to God and truly and sincerely asked that God's will be done. And at that moment, everything changed. I was very calm and peaceful and felt great. And I had this very physical sense of being held and comforted and reassured that everything would be fine. My husband and my children would be fine, regardless of whether I lived or died.
This is while you're under the water with no air, you can't breathe, you're completely submerged. Do you believe you were dying?
Yes. I continued to do self-assessment exams, and I knew I couldn't breathe, but for me it was a very seamless transition. I had never wanted to drown. I had always been afraid of drowning, even though I'm a water person. And for me, one of the remarkable things is that I never felt panic. I never felt afraid. I was really very calm and continually reassured, even though I knew that I had no air and I knew that I was dying.
You say you felt you rose up and out of the river, and when my soul broke through the surface of the water, I encountered a group of 15 or 20 souls who greeted me with the most overwhelming joy I have ever experienced. Tell us about that.
It was fantastic. These were people, spirits, souls. I'm not quite sure what to call them. All the words sound a little goofy. But they embraced me and were so filled with love and joy. And they were people that I had known for an eternity. And they had known me for an eternity. And we were so happy to see each other. And they were clearly there to help me go down this path and protect me. And it was wonderful. They were exploding with God's love and grace. And they took me down this path that was so beautiful that I have really no words to describe it. And time and space had a different sense. And so I could rejoiced with them.